Well, welcome, Dr. Kathleen. Please tell me how you got here and your story behind, your adventure here.
Oh my gosh, I'll be quick because I'm not young, and I have a very winding road journey. There were some very key critical moments that shaped me, but let me back to the very beginning. I went into medicine completely naive, not really understanding a lot of, I love the body. I was really fascinated by the human body. I was involved in coaching elite level athletes and sport was my thing from a very young age, like 10, 12, running, doing everything. Once I got involved in sport in college at the elite level, the US national team, rowing team, and subsequently stayed with that as an athlete. And then once I did finished my time as a college athlete and a US national team athlete, I then went to coaching. So I love performance and how to make the body perform and how to make the systems and the group of people in a boat work together. And really, one of the really thing is health is a harmony of systems. Health is a harmony of how those systems work together. If one's degenerating, another will step up and will allow that one system that might be, when we break down a muscle working out, lifting weights, it degenerates and then we rebuild it. If muscles degenerating, other systems kick in, tendons, ligaments, fascial tissue, you name it, to allow that muscle to regenerate. Same if the pancreas in my situation breaks down. I ended up with type 1 diabetes late in life at 40. And I believe that was because I lived a very health-oriented life for 30 years prior to that. And then, boom, post the birth of my three children, 1 year, third year of medical school as one child, a son, and fourth year of medical school, twins by surprise. And that broke my system down. And I knew I had the vulnerability for that, type 1 diabetes. It was in my family, my father's side, my mother's side, my siblings, lots of people. I never wanted it, but I got it. And so that was a pivotal moment in my career. But I ended up with, so we really want systems to work together. We want to understand that about people. And what I like to do in my practice is I spent a lot of time, 2 decades and 3 decades, understanding clinical patterns and literacy. How do these numbers fit together? The numbers are not the story. The patient tells the story. What is it that the patient wants, remembers from when they feel well, and how do we bring them back there? So going through this and understanding this pattern literacy and seeing more and more sent me down the pathway again for my own restoration of health when I had to take a peptide, insulin, right, to live.
Mhm.
Too little, not enough, too much, deadly. Too little could be deadly, too much could be deadly. So, how do you find the balance in the dosing of the peptide, insulin? And how are you going to take that? How are you going to manage your external life and your internal life being on this peptide? Meaning stress, my sugar with just stress alone will go through the roof, travel through the roof, like 400, 500 just from travel, no food. So, food is not the regulator alone of insulin and blood sugar. And we need to know that because we push CGMs and you measure, you have your CGM on and you think it's all about the food. It is not just about the food. It is about so many other things. And even before the CGM will tell you anything, your insulin's going to go awry. So there are numbers that will predict diabetes, type 2 or type 1, prior to a sugar abnormality. And it would be more like an adiponectin and other things. So this was really eye-opening to me, having, 2.5 decades almost of my own journey with peptides and a medical challenge. Then fast forward, my son is in college. My son has a traumatic brain injury in an unfortunate uh, traumatic accident, a violent accident where he was hit in the head with a crowbar from behind and knocked down and ended up with bleeds in his head. This was in California on the campus, and he ended up in a hospital, and it was horrifying. And that was the beginning of, okay, I'm coming out. I'm coming out from all the stem cell work that I did, the exosome work that I did in the background, learning with international groups, global groups of people, and the peptide work that I did. Because what happened for Angus, which was really pivotal, my son, that changed was a moment that changed everything for me, was that he had his he came back. I brought him back from California. He had his surgeries, and then I brought him to Spalding Rehab here in Boston. Amazing hospital, colleagues of mine, really respect them. And the standard of care for him was, while he had neuroinflammation and all of these things, was watch and see. Let's wait. Let's wait 12 months, 18 months, whatever time frame. And I thought, we have a window of opportunity today to help this 19-year-old son of mine to be well. I am not going to miss the window of helping to heal neuroinflammation, or helping to restore mitochondrial health, or helping to clean up and get the debris out of the head from all of the blood that had to be cleaned up from the large number of bleeds he had in his head and everything else, the stress of it. He took some time off from school. He stayed home, and we did biological therapies. What are biological therapies? We did IVs with nutrients. We did healthy food. He slept. He did light therapy. This was, I don't know, 12 or 13 years ago. We did stem cell therapy, we did exosome therapy, and we did peptide therapy. What peptides? We did cerebrolysin, we did thymosin alpha, we did thymosin beta, we did many BPC, we did many peptides way back then, and we did them all relatively through the IV, and we just basically restored his health. It was a journey. It was a winding road. It was not a straight path, from A to B. There were ups and downs, but it was very traumatic. He had lost a lot of weight. He couldn't eat as much. His jaw was, shut because he had to have surgery on the jaw from the fractures and things like that. But at the end of the day, all of this, now, more than a decade later, he graduated as a math major. He's extremely well. He's fully functioning without any evidence of any challenge. And he's engaged to be married. I mean, he's got a job. He's thriving. So thank goodness that I had gone down the path of understanding, all of these biological therapies. One other little caveat, or tidbit, was when I was competing. We competed in Germany, East Germany. And I remember being, on the dock, getting ready to race the East Germans, the Russians, and others in the early 1980s. And I remember looking at my athletes, our athletes, my teammates, and thinking, who are these guys and where do they come from? And it
Mhm.
wasn't really hormones, I'm sure, that they were doing. It was peptides, because Kavinson and the geroprotective and the Russian, I don't know, doctors understood peptides then. And they were clearly using them, because this wasn't hormones, because we got tested for hormones. They tested our urine, they
Mm.
tested us. And so if it were clearly hormones, we would have been able to find that. So that was a really cool thing that I kind of, connected dots between my experience with rowing and then my experience in medicine and helping to heal and allow the body to regenerate using peptides and other things. Really fun stuff.
Wow, what an amazing story. But you really are ahead of the curve. So, if that was 10 years ago with your son, you obviously had educated yourself for I don't know how many years prior. And I'm a little interested in that because, of course, the conventional approach, and I have had very similar stories, is the wait and see approach and being reactive because we don't have the tool to deal with it. They only have, the pharmaceuticals or surgery or whatever it is. And so what prompted you, I guess I'm guessing it was years before this accident happened with your son that you
Yeah, it
first
was.
got introduced to the peptides exosomes because now as well we had discussed before recording, I mean there seem to be exploding, but this is not new. This is not new.
No, it's not new. But I think one of the points that you made in terms of reactionary in medicine, mainstream medicine versus wait and see. I mean, wait and see is completely different from reactionary. That's a gamble. And,
Mhm.
windows of opportunity exist where we absolutely want to intervene because those are inflection points where we can really help change the trajectory of health versus illness. I mean, if I hadn't intervened with my son and I hadn't done that work globally, actually with clinicians that were from um, all over the world. They were from all over the world. They were from Iran, they were from Helsinki, they were from Ukraine, they were from California. My colleagues were mostly in California, even though I was in Boston. And we met every Tuesday morning to discuss these types of therapies for years. So I was very blessed to have curiosity, to ask questions, to talk to people, to meet people. One thing leads to another. You just have to be open and listening. And when you listen and, an athlete, one of the 1980 Olympic hockey players who won the gold showed up in my office and he wanted a treatment for an injury. And I said, look, David, I don't really know how to get you that treatment. So I went and I found somebody who could help me with that, who then connected me to these other groups of people. And I went down the avenue of saying, I want to be part of this learning. I want to share what I know. I want to learn from you. And that was how I ended up learning over time because somebody showed up in my office asking me for something. I didn't know how to offer it or get it. I didn't know if it would be useful, but I then explored it. So it's really staying open-minded, expanding our knowledge base because science exists and science is ever emerging, particularly in the field of biologics. Biologics, which include peptides, biologics, which include exosomes and stem cells. The information is there. One of the challenges, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And what we need to really do is reel in the misinformation because using these requires knowledge, clinical training, and understanding of physiology and healthy biology so that we know who we're looking at, what their clinical pattern literacy looks like in terms of data, what their story is, and that we are responsibly giving them things strategically to get them whole again, to get them back to the remembered state of wellness that they desire.
Right. So, of course, they have been here, but what do you think is going on, in your opinion, that all of a sudden this has become mainstream? I mean, I think obviously we have the weight loss peptides, which I think has gotten quite a bit of attention. And then I guess the second question is what is the biggest myth regarding peptides?
Well, I think for me, the biggest myth is the way that we approach them. So, from a science perspective, there's a lot of information, and we can't compare anything about something that's natural biologically to
Hmm.
something a novel synthetic drug. And that's one of the things that, you know, institutions and regulatory agencies have done. And so the challenge with that is that when we have a synthetic novel drug, a statin or something that we're using, a monoclonal antibody, that is really just one silo. And those are intended to show, I mean, we don't even think about the confounding variables when we study those, and we study them for 15 years and we invest a lot of money. Biology doesn't work that way. And we need a better regulatory imagination to understand how biology works and that we can apply the same framework to a novel pharmaceutical drug that we apply to a biological compound that naturally exists within us. And in my practice, I try to only use biological therapies, things that helped create us from conception through today are the things that I think are missing or lacking, or there's an imbalance in that we need to restore that balance in. That is the best way to get health using the ingredients that created us in the first place. And certainly stem cells created us in the first place, and exosomes created us in the second place. And then in the third place, it was peptides and many other things. It's pretty remarkable that we ignore biology, over finding novel pharmaceutical meds that really didn't have any role in the body and will never truly heal the body. They may mask something, they may give you symptom relief, but that is really, we're hiding the guy behind the guise of safety, and I don't really buy that.
Yes, but I'm guessing when you started though, you must have had people questioning this
Oh,
because
no, no, no. Starting was scary, but immediately, pretty quickly on, I don't know. The path is just amazing the way it unfolds. Once you start and you're open to something, the path unfolds. Pretty quickly on, I met who currently today they're both 92 doctors who founded some peptides, and I met other who had been studying peptides since 1960. They're now
Mhm.
90. So 1960 is a long time ago.
Yes.
And that led me to understand that we say that these peptides have not been studied in humans. Well, they exist in humans and they have been studied in humans. We just have applied a different regulatory framework to them. So I met these doctors because I had used peptides on my son and on another young young child in my practice whose parents begged me to help him because he was very, very sick. And so I went to this conference, on peptides in DC, and I said, it was all the researchers, and these have been researched since 1960. These are thymic peptides. You can take cerebral lysin. Cerebral lysin has been researched since 1954. It's been shown to be effective in stroke and brain injury and other things. And over 50 countries accept it as a drug, accept it as a treatment, not a drug, but a treatment, a biological therapy. Same with thymic peptides. You know, over 35 countries accept those as treatments and they are available at a pharmacy. So it's kind of, what if over 35 countries accept those as treatments, what's going on in the United States that our regulatory systems don't allow us to use them? I'm not
Well,
going to answer that question, but I'm going
okay.
to
I mean, I
pose that
definitely have some
question.
thoughts on what might be the reason. I always tell people when you're evaluating research, the first question you must ask yourself is who benefits and follow the money. That's all I
There
can
you
say
go.
back.
I mean, if 50 other countries say that it's okay and it's been used for how many years? I mean, 75 years in other countries, like cerebral lysin and the thymic peptides, then we have a challenge here, right? The United States said no, not yet. I'm not going to answer the question why. That's for everybody to answer for themselves.
Right. There you go. And as you mentioned, which I think is a lot of people may not realize that insulin, which has been around since like the 1920s, am I wrong? Something like that, um, is a peptide. And so
It's
maybe,
interesting. Even insulin, because I have two siblings with that have type 1, and they were very young when they had to take insulin. But the insulin that they took is very different from the insulin that I took. Theirs was derived from porcine. It wasn't as bioidentical. Now we have recombinant bioidentical insulin. So it's really an you know, interesting, I don't know, challenge that we have in order to understand. We need to know, though, that our sources are pharmaceutical grade of our
well,
peptides.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
and I think that's been since they have had the pushback and not regulating it, I think it hasn't stopped people from using them, but it seems as though that is where the concern has been, but I'm hoping things are going to be turning around soon.
I mean, I think the concern is twofold. One is, frameworks. How are we do? What is the source? Is there a trackable source? Can we find out where that source came from, or is that traceable supply chain? We don't know it. We need to know that we can trace these, that we can understand, that we can see the purity, the traceability of the supply. We need to know that they are made in pharmaceutical grade, places in my mind. And then we need to have um, clinical training around them because, again, another challenge number one is the sourcing and that framework. Challenge number two would be when to use what and in who is the individual that you choose to use the variety of peptides. This isn't just let's just put them all together and make a new drug. There are strategical ways.
There's nuance.
There's nuance. There's
And
strategical ways to use them
mhm.
in order to get true regenerative healing biologically.
Now, are these exclusively through compounding pharmacies?
Well, if we're going to inject them, certainly. I mean, getting a powder from China, I have a
Yeah.
long story about that, is a whole other,
No,
you know.
Don't do
No.
it. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Or from you don't know where it is. And so the issue is this. If you come to me and I have clinical expertise in understanding the body, the human body, and how it degenerates and how it regenerates, what's the cycle of life, and looking at data and listening to the story and understanding the timeline of a challenge, the thing is I will obtain my treatments, any of my biological treatments from pharmaceutical grade sources that I understand the purity, I understand that they're traceable, I under all of that. And then I have a clinical framework for doing this, and I'm collecting the data as I go. Now, if we don't do that, no, what my doing that, I have licenses for that. I have a medical license, I have a DEA license for, prescribing, and I have malpractice. And as a result, I am responsible for what I give to that patient on the other side of the table that I've spent the time and suggested that they take these things. When you are not a clinician and when you don't have all of that licensure and you can't get pharmaceutical grade, you don't have responsibility, and the client needs to know that. The client needs to know that they're assuming responsibility for what they're doing. And I think that that is a big shift in how we approach, particularly the injectables. The orals are over the counter, like many other orals can be, like DHEA, whatever. But I think that we need to understand that to inject something into the extracellular matrix within the tissue, we have to know the source, the standard, the purity, and we have to have a framework for doing that. Because otherwise, we're just giving people something hand over fist without knowing how it's going to work and not having a strategy and responsibility and accountability for helping that patient to heal. And that's
So
really important.
it's huge. So to me, it sounds like your first big suggestion would be to go to someone who is going to stand behind what they are giving you. And not just, you can get things off the internet now anywhere, but not a good idea. But actually, I'd like to back up for a second here, just for people, because it took me a little while to just really explaining what is the peptide, the amino acids, and also kind of how they perform in the body. Just even thinking about like the weight loss ones, I know, the GLP-1s, they're naturally occurring, but obviously work very, very different when you're injecting them.
Yes, the GLPs are naturally occurring. In fact, they're made in the microbiome. So if you need a GLP and you take a GLP and you find it's effective for you, you should, while you're taking that GLP, you should fix your microbiome. You should fix your gut because there's a challenge in your gut. Because we understand a little bit. There's the microbiome is remarkably complex, and we are really at the beginning. We're just at the tip of it, understanding it. But at the end of the day, we do know that GLP-1s are synthesized in the microbiome and in the GI tract. And when the GI tract has a lot of challenges because of the way we live life and the sourcing of food, etc., I don't want to go down that path, but
That's a whole nother
that's a
topic.
peptide that we need. Now, I'm going to tell you a little fact that I love that I learned from an MIT rocket scientist who's a
Okay.
youngish guy, like 30-ish, really amazing um, man that I met recently within this past month. And he told me he works, I call him Coral Daddy. He works on coral reefs and he works on barrier protection because coral can survive for 1,000 years. That's biology on its own. It makes thousands of peptides to do this.
Wow.
And it makes thousands of peptides to degenerate parts of it that aren't needed anymore and to regenerate new parts that are needed. And it can live independently from anything else as long as we protect the barrier reef from all of the environmental exposures. So for us, GLP-1s are naturally made in us. Insulin is naturally made in us. And the peptides, amino acids, we make them. How do we make them? We make them from our food, predominantly from protein sources because protein have high amounts of amino acids. The amino acids get digested in the mouth, in the stomach, in the GI tract, and basically vegetables and other healthy food sources, live food sources, release other minerals and nutrients as cofactors. And we take one amino acid and we join it together to other amino acids. We can have GHKCU or KPV that are small numbers of amino acids that are joined together by cofactors like magnesium or zinc or other things, and then they become a peptide. So naturally, if we had really healthy guts and we were eating the best quality food, live food, food that, that has a short shelf life, the shorter the shelf life of the food, the longer your shelf life. If the shelf life of the food is long and it is in the pantry for years, the shorter your shelf life. So think about your food, because your food will help you not only make peptides, but utilize the peptides that you're taking subcutaneously or orally or intranasally, because we can take them topically, we can take them a number of ways, but eating well will help you utilize them more effectively. So peptides just are, they're not like, a B12, but all molecules in the body are signaling. Peptides are signaling, and the key big word that you won't love, but I'll tell you and then I'll explain it, is they're pleiotropic. Pleiotropic means that they have many functions. One peptide does many things. And the key thing
Mhm.
about most peptides is peptides are smart enough to know what to do. In other words, some things stimulate, some things downregulate. You can inhibit or you can stimulate. I could be depressed, which is kind of inhibition, or I could stimulate and be anxious, right? Peptides know where is the body today. It can tell and sense from the surrounding tissue around a cell at the cellular level, what does the body need? It can regulate as opposed to stimulate or inhibit responses within the body. So peptides can come from food, they can come from sources, because sometimes the peptides in our body, I'll give you an example of this. The peptides in our body cannot always do the work, and we may need them exogenously. So this same group of researchers, MD, PhDs, that I found decades ago and that I started to work with a little bit, I went to a conference in Italy, in Rome, pre-2020. And so at this conference in Rome, one of the MD PhDs won an award, and she won an award for studying over 2 decades heart attacks, and could we heal the heart tissue, the heart muscle, post a heart attack? And so what she learned in a nutshell is that there was plenty of peptide available in the epicardial space, the space around the heart, but it couldn't access the heart. And when she added from the outside, subcutaneously, IV, other ways, peptide, this is thymosin beta 4, when she added thymosin beta 4 exogenously from the outside in, as opposed to what was already there and trying to do the job of cleanup of that heart muscle after the heart attack, she found that that would accelerate the cleanup. And so after hearing her and seeing her win this award in October, in January, within 3 months, you can't make this up, I was presented with a patient I had for a long time. He came in and he had heart failure. His heart muscle had failed. This is several years ago. I don't know, 5 years ago, more, something like that. At any rate, he had heart failure. He went to the hospital at Harvard. He spent 10 days in the hospital. They saw that he had heart failure. It was iatrogenic. They couldn't figure out the cause. Likely, in my mind, it was viral induced, but it doesn't matter. So he had heart failure. They gave him the the standard of care is 8 medications, pharmaceutical, and then come back every month and measure your heart. So if a normal heart is about 60%, it can squeeze and pump and send out 60% blood at a time with each pump, heartbeat kind of thing. And his was at 20%. So he really had heart failure. He was not happy about it, didn't feel good, etc. At any rate, I said, do what they told you to do at the hospital. Don't change anything. You go on back regularly. Let's just see what happens. So 6 to 8 months later, he comes back and he said, I've gone every month. My pumping ejection fraction is still at 20%. I want to try what you told me you learned about. I said, okay, you're sure? He said, yes. So we started to do peptides. We started to do thymic peptides and other peptides for his heart strategically. And I understood his numbers and I knew what to measure. It wasn't a straight road, A to B. It was a road where some things went up and some things went down, a little scary, What do I do? What do I do? I had to ask myself when I measured the data. But at the end of the day, I stayed the course with my strategy. And within 6 months, he went back for his scan and he was at an ejection fraction of 45%. And he continues at an ejection fraction today of 45%. Up and down, because there was a point in time a year or two ago, I don't remember time anymore, when they took peptides off the market, so we didn't have it. So his ejection fraction went down towards 25% again, but we brought it back to 45% as soon as they were available. So it's a long-term process because his heart was already vulnerable before that heart failure happened. There was already a decade or more of things that were happening, and the heart was trying to heal itself. But when he got that hit of that last trigger, he ended up with heart failure. So we have our work cut out for us over time, a decade, to really do the best we can to help his heart continue to pump at 45% minimally. And that is just an amazing, amazing effect that I've seen in my practice.
Wow, how rewarding it must have been for you. I mean,
I mean,
that is quite a story. But now I'm thinking about looking, towards the future and our aging population. But even for those who may not have like an overt condition, like how do you see us using all of these peptides like moving forward? I mean, I'm thinking I want to just about me right now, my hair, like hair loss, skin, and the copper peptides. I mean, hey, if I'm going to live to be 90, I want to look good. But I'm
yeah.
just thinking about this whole population that is aging. And even before waiting for something to happen, how can we use these peptides?
Well, remember this though, Bonnie. Health isn't transactional, it's foundational. So we have
Hmm.
to, again, we have to know, we have to be in tune with our body. We have to know where we are. We have to get some measure of baseline because we have to understand our foundation today. Luckily, I had known this gentleman for a long time, so I knew when his labs were normal and I knew when they became abnormal. I knew when the signals of the immune system that affected his heart and caused cardiomyopathy. I knew that there was something brewing and I was looking and we were treating and we were doing things. But it wasn't until he, had that fall off of a cliff, that earthquake, that he wanted to really engage. So
Sure.
if you want to engage early now and you want to say, I think I'm well now, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Think about where am I today? And I would say, think, how's my brain? How's my heart? What is the organ that's my weakest link? And what are the inflection points during my life? You know, after 25, when our brain is fully formed and then begins to go down. If you're a male and it's 30, your testosterone is reducing 1% per year. When you're a woman, if you've had endometriosis through your, menstrual years. And I mean, we've got to be prepared for inflection points because that is the biggest way that we change the trajectory of health and health span. Because longevity without quality of life and health span is not a win. Lifespan is not a win. Health span is a win, right?
Yeah,
So
no. Hmm.
longevity, we need to get foundational numbers. We need to understand, what is my baseline? And we need to understand our weakest link. I think you have to look back because the history informs the present. You have to get your data today in order to inform what you want to achieve in the future. And I like biological age market, I like biological age testing. And I really like the systems age generation lab. You can do that with your clients. It's available to anyone. And it basically will help you understand your weakest link. You know, this is where we're going. They take 460 biomarkers and they effectively take those biomarkers. They don't measure them and give you a readout of 460 because the body doesn't work on one biomarker at a time. It works on how these interact. That's why we don't just give 5 peptides at once and walk away for your hair growth. We need to understand what these
Yeah.
biomarkers need, right? We can try TB4, we can try GHK, we can try any of these peptides, but we probably have to understand what is the origin of the problem. So if you do a systems age bio age testing and you understand that the weak link might be my immune system or the weak being weak, because hair is a response to the immune system. Here is a response to toxicity. Here is a response to hormonal balance. So we need to understand where is that weakest link, because that will determine for you, Bonnie, what it is that you want to start first strategically to maintain your hair or your skin or your nails, right? But if you are me and you say, well, I want to maintain, healthy tendons, ligaments, bone and muscle,
Bones. Hmm.
I may want to try a different series of peptides, but I would want to track that with data in order to understand, am I making measurable progress? The most important thing is how you feel, but the second most important thing is that you can track it, train it, and adapt and pivot as necessary, because life hands us a lot of surprises.
Yes, what you bring up to me, this is the biggest point because a lot of people will go to, a conventional practitioner and they say your labs are normal
No.
and you're fine. But let's be honest, I mean, how does heart disease develop, diabetes, cancer, any of the things that are going to get us, they develop over decades. And so the thought is, right, by doing getting a little picture about what's going on decades earlier while you're quote unquote, you're feeling good, functioning well. I mean, to me, this is invaluable. I mean, I want to be like the coral reef. No, maybe not 1,000 years, but but I certainly think there is no doubt that this can be helpful to increase that health span.
Yeah, you look at longevity, you look at life through a longevity lens. You look at your health or your disease through a longevity lens. And then you identify, the weak links through, I think, the biological age of different systems. And then you basically pick identify critical inflection points where there's a mismatch between the data and how you feel, and then you want to identify a little bit more, what is this window of opportunity so that I can stop the aging accelerator, intervene with a peptide, an exosome, a hormone, balance the hormones, a nutrient. All of these things have to be taken into account to create the whole. And so we never want to miss out on giving a peptide when someone doesn't have an adequate B12. And we know every single patient comes into my practice and they're told they have normal labs. And I look at the labs. I have one patient, she came in, she couldn't even agree to treatment. Her husband brought her in. She was only in her 40s. She had come from Harvard Hospital. She had been in the hospital multiple times over 2 years, perfectly functioning prior to this catatonic event. They came to me and they said, we don't want to do what they're doing anymore. Somebody told us to come here to help her husband, that you could help us. And they said, her labs are normal. We just came from the Mass General. And I said, okay, well, let me see them. They said, no, they're all normal. I said, let me see them. I looked at the labs. The white blood cell count was 2.2.
Sorry.
The
Okay.
B12, right? I mean,
Well,
yes,
that's, I
jaw
mean,
drop,
total depletion of your immune system.
2.2. The
And
B12 was 300. So those are just such basic challenges. And I'm like, these are not normal labs. They are normal. I said, I understand that they told you that they were normal, but they're not normal. And I have to understand this whole before I can help your wife. She's another woman who was unwell for 2.5 years and then came to see me, and she had brain issues. She had shockwave therapy to the brain dozens of times. She
oh,
was on
wow.
IVIG. She was on many things. She was still catatonic. She could not converse with me to agree to treatment. She could not draw a clock face and put the hands in or anything else. And within 6 months, using peptides and IV nutrients and other things, she was perfectly normal, and she's normal today.
Oh, my goodness.
So we need,
That's an amazing story.
and she was 49-ish when I saw her, and nobody had talked to her about hormones, and nobody had talked to her about these inflection points that are prime windows of opportunity when we really need to be intervening, because menopause and andropause, especially menopause, is a metabolic earthquake. I mean, are you kidding me? Everything goes awry. We know that cardiovascular disease can increase within a decade by 35%. We know that brain disease and dementia, the single most important thing that we can do for a woman to protect their brain is intervene with hormonal support therapy or hormonal replacement therapy. So it's not just peptides. And I used peptides in this woman, and I used hormones in this woman, and we used many, many things. We used HBOT. We restored her B12. We helped her immune system get
Just in
healthier.
case people don't realize what HBOT is,
Oh,
hyperbaric.
hyperbaric
I just
oxygen
want to say, I mean, I know what it is, but
chamber, an oxygen chamber.
the
And
hyperbaric, I've heard quite a bit about that.
her family was so involved. They brought her every day, 5 days a week to go into the oxygen chamber. And, and when she began to wake up, I met her in July. We started treatment by August 1st. She wrote me a beautiful card at Thanksgiving. I'm so grateful we met you. It was
Oh,
amazing.
wow. Well, that it
I
makes
mean,
it
pretty
makes
quick.
everything worthwhile when you hear that from a patient. My goodness.
It
But I'm
makes me
just
pinch myself.
Yeah, but I am curious though, prior to her becoming catatonic, I mean, like you're saying, the inflection points, there must have been all these things that happened that just no one picked up on before that happened, before she became
I would
totally
say,
catatonic.
important question. And I think that the most important question that a lot of people fail to think about is their immune system health.
Mm,
Because it really, for both of these people, whether it was the woman with the brain problem, the
with the heart.
catatonia,
Yeah.
or the heart problem, it was an immune system problem. And for you and for me, Bonnie, and my diabetes is an immune system problem. And at the end of the day, why do people die? I worked in the morgue for a year here at Mass General.
Oh,
So I was
really?
a doctor in the morgue. And at the end of the day, the majority of people succumb to an infection, a lung infection, a urinary tract infection, kidney infection, a brain infection. That's what we succumb to. Cancer is an immune problem. Autoimmunity is an immune problem. Inflammation is an immune problem. So, one of the things our immune system gets trained through our gut, it gets trained very early on. It creates a memory. And by 25, we have that memory, it's set. And then that innate and adaptive part of the immune system, the T cell immunity, begins to go down. And we have a lot of B cell immunity for bacteria and other things. But effectively, we need to understand if there's one system that you want to know about, whether you're your dad that you mentioned with, a bowel
Crohn's.
issue, Crohn's, he needs to know his immune system. It includes the microbiome. It includes all of the different immunological cytokines and the cells that are living there right under on the other side of the uh, epithelium of the bowel. It's critically important for us to understand the immune system. This woman had a trigger, and this man had a trigger, and I would suggest that both of their triggers were the same. Their triggers were immunologically driving, and their systems were unable to really handle that final trigger because nobody had paid attention to it prior to a vaccine. And they both ended up with post-vaccination syndrome. And one man's was expressed because we're all unique as his heart, and another woman's was expressed as her brain. So I think it's critically important that we think about immunity and that we check it before we wreck ourselves. And I think it it is attempting to renew every 21 days. We understand the bone marrow. We understand that we do bone marrow transplants to give, people life when they're suffering from severe cancers. We need to understand our own immune systems. We need to
So
dial that
how
in.
would someone go about what do you think is the best test or to test for the immune system? I'm just thinking of some maybe compromised individuals that they wanted to get a flu vaccine or something. But yes, I am in agreement with you certainly that I feel like the immune system is the most underappreciated system in the body, and it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. And it's
Exactly.
constantly keeping us at homeostasis that we feel healthy and well. And then it seems like, oh, I got a bad night's sleep. That's like a simple thing. But the point is, it's like this little thing that just the tipping point, right? And things go awry.
There's a lot of triggers, I mean, overtraining will trigger an immune system inflammation,
Stress. We
stress.
didn't we didn't talk about that, but that is right
Exactly.
huge.
overtraining, not sleeping, wrong food, wrong time of day, no circadian rhythm, poor relationships with each other, with
Mm.
ourselves, all of those things. Giving all of our time to our work, but not really to recovering. That's overtraining too. That's just in the professional setting. So we can measure, I mean, a simple CBC with differential. I would say that 80% of my people come from primary care physicians or other physicians with just a CBC. If you don't have a complete blood count with differential, you are not able to track. So the CBC with differential is critical for understanding your bone marrow, for understanding the health of your white blood cells in your Department of Defense immunologically. It tells you about your Pentagon Department of Defense. There are 5 parts of the Pentagon, right? And then subdivisions of the Pentagon. We have those 5 Joint Chiefs of Staff there. We have neutrophils, lymphocytes, eosinophils, monocytes, etc. And then below that, we can look within the differential of the white blood cell count. Where are we lacking? Are we lacking in lymphocytes? Do we have too many eosinophils? It is critical because eosinophils will tell you about sneezes, wheezes, weird diseases, maybe mold, maybe fungal, maybe other things. Neutrophils will tell you about bacteria. Are you prepared for bacterial infections? Lymphocytes will tell you about viral exposures and how is your body handling those viruses that are part of our life story. Once they get into us, they never leave us. They live within us, but they can reactivate. So understanding a CBC with diff, the other labs that will be really impactful in understanding the immune system will be the ferritin, the iron, the TIBC, the total iron binding capacity, figuring out the TSAT, the transferrin saturation from that. Those are just 2 very simple parts to look at. CBC with diff, $2 test, and iron studies, including ferritin, TIBC, and you have a lot of information right there. Before you go get a vaccine, check yourself before you wreck yourself.
I love it. No, no, I mean it is huge. And not
It's
just,
you.
I mean, the whole idea to me is giving people the information to participate in their own well-being and healthcare. And so it's not against, which we're not going to get into the overall vaccine discussion, but there's a nuance there again about implementing, these potentially life-saving, but also can be very harmful as well.
No, it's really important the work you do, the work that all of the colleagues that we know simultaneously together, is so important because in primary care, we're inundated with sickness. I don't do primary care anymore, but I've done it, and we were inundated with sickness. I did it for over a decade, and there are enormous care gaps that primary care can understand that basically they happen during various life phases and people come with symptoms that fundamentally alter whether you're 20 years of age, 30 years of age, 40 years of age, long-term health status. And we really need to understand that there are opportunities where we can intervene. And sometimes if we had an opportunity to intervene when someone was 20 years old, like my son and his brain injury, and we didn't, we missed that window, there would be something at 30 years and 40 years and 50 years of age that we can't really change dramatically, or it's going to take a very long time to do. So we have to be open to these prime windows of opportunity for events and times of our life where things happen that can accelerate aging in an organ tissue. And we have to reshape that trajectory. We have to take that trajectory and turn it back from going towards disease. We don't ever want to silence those symptoms. We want to hear those symptoms. We want that noise to speak to us because then we will understand it and we can shift the trajectory from disease towards regeneration, biological regeneration with biological therapies. And that is critically important because had I not understood that window of opportunity for my son, thank God I did. Every patient that sits in front of me presents me with what is the window of opportunity I need to see with them for intervening. And when I see that based on their story, their data, and we begin to intervene, it is unbelievable unbelievable how that trajectory from disease shifts back towards health. Mind-boggling. And
Yeah.
that's the work you're doing. And thank you for doing that. Any
Well,
could be
it's
any
empowering.
clinician that we can find that can
Mhm.
understand that framework, critical.
So when you talk about those, again, the inflection points in, I can't help but think about bone health, especially because
Mhm.
there's so many years, and when people are in their 20s, they're not thinking about this stuff.
And they're
But
not
but
even bashing their bones the way they should, right?
and right. So I mean, I guess I my question is, how young would you do these testing? The by the I'm sorry, repeat again what the
The
test is.
foundational testing, the CBC with
The
those
not
others.
that, no,
The bios Oh
the bio.
no, I've done systems age, biological age testing, epigenetically, even on my staff who come here to learn before they go on to a clinical school, nursing, medical, whatever. Even
Mhm.
I've done it on them because they now have a foundation. We've all done it. Every single person from age 24 to 68 in my practice have done testing, biological age testing, because there's a great test out there that is, looks at these different inflection points as well, and that we can follow over time. It's called systems age. But I think that the critical thing is seeing what that testing reveals in the 24-year-old and the 25-year-old and the 29-year-old in my practice is very beneficial for me to understand the whole and understand the dynamics of clinical pattern literacy of the data we collect. Wearables are meaningless to me. They're going to give me a little information, heart rate variability. I love it, sure. But the reality is, I don't even want to get to the point of high blood pressure because that's a symptom of a problem. It's not a disease. I want to
Mhm.
understand for these 24-year-olds and 25-year-olds that now have been in my life and working with me for 2 and 3 years. They've committed to me. I'm committed to their health span and their, trajectories and their longevity. I want to understand, over time how and teach them to understand themselves how they can intervene at different inflection points. Bone is key. I mean, bone, we need to start a lot earlier than we do. And now we have all these new novel drug therapies that we know when we've looked at studies of 500,000 people, um, basically we showed that the drugs that we use, even the newer drugs, have a 35% increased risk in heart disease, whether it's AFib or MI or other. That's enormous. I would not take a drug that increased my risk for heart disease, except it's not a drug, it's a biologic. I would take estrogen, progesterone, because those reduce your risk by 30%. So understanding biology versus pharmacology is completely different.
And I just think of the patients I've had that have such bad side effects um, from what is, I think it was reclassed.
Yes.
Terrible.
And alendronate, Fosamax, horrible.
I mean, but then there's so much pressure from, their doctors. Oh, like you need to take this without, I guess they don't understand the alternatives. And then the
Mhm.
other thing is about the timing. Like I wasn't told to get a DEXA scan until after you go into menopause, which is I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
when do we lose most of our bone? In perimenopause. Am I wrong?
It starts in the 20s and then it just keeps going and accelerates. And I think you're right. Perimenopause is worse. I mean, it's really 40s, early
Right.
40s is a very significant window if you don't understand through your 20s and 30s. I think you're right. And the reason, you know, the doctors are well intentioned. I think the institutions
Hmm.
really hold the power. And I think they hold the power to allow for the clinicians to use their clinical judgment and to educate, to become educated in additional ways. Because now I know for the last 2 years, at last, now that the black box warning on hormone replacement has been lifted, we have
Yes.
conferences here in Boston at Harvard on hormone replacement. And this is brand new to them. And I was at the Brigham working as a clinician when the Women's Health Initiative came down in the early 2000s. And it's really disturbing how we used, the wrong mechanism, the wrong treatment, the wrong mode of delivery. We measured the wrong things in the data. This should have been a study that got sent to the graveyard. Instead, it got elevated above to the skies, and we cited it for a long time and
Like
put the
20
fear of
years.
God into everybody. And that was really unfortunate.
Well,
There
it still is. People are still terrified of taking the hormones.
No, that's absurd. This is really, really a big need. But I think with peptides, there's a graveyard of studies that were done in humans, phase
Right.
2 and phase 3 trials that have had to get stuck in that graveyard because we didn't want that to become visible or knowledge. And that's really important. So I think it's really at the hand of institutions, but the clinicians have to ask more questions, be more curious, be more open to learning and to going back to physiology, pathophysiology, biology, and understanding how do I restore health with biological therapies like a B12, like a hormone, whether it's cortisol, DHEA, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, regulating insulin, any of those things. And then, kind of PRP and PRF because they're kind of like secretomes that secrete growth factors, peptides, exosomes, and all of these things. This exists. The science is there. We need better stewardship of bringing that science forward to help create a healthier population.
Well, I believe it's from practitioners like yourself that are out there doing it for years and years and years. But I feel like now all of a sudden all random influencers and people are jumping on the bandwagon and telling everyone what to take. I
No,
mean,
that's a problem. They have no accountability and they don't even know, they can't get it from a verifiable source. And so I think that's really challenging. And I think we
well,
really need to steward this. Look, there are plenty of oral peptides available and creams and other ways. I think that those go for it. And I think they're great. Many people who are making them that are in the business. So, but it's really important. I believe in regulation. I started the International Peptide Society, the Clinical Peptide Society. I'm a board member on the American Academy of Peptide Medicine. I started the American Academy of Stem Cell Physicians, and now I'm a board member on the American Academy of Stem Cell Medicine. And I'm a scientific advisory board for Dizawa Muse cells, stem cells, and exosomes because I believe in these treatments and because I think that we need to do the right thing at the right time for the right person. We need accountability. I need to be accountable for things that I guide people to do. And I think that we need to have regulation around it, not strict. I mean, that regulation has to understand that these are biological. They're not novel synthetic drugs that we're going to study in a vacuum. These are biological, pleiotropic, multi-mechanistic. They have many mechanisms of action. We need to collect the data systematically. We need to correct that there's no mode of data, that we don't have data. We need to work together as a group of clinicians that care about the impact and the outcome that we can do. We need outcome tracking as well. It's really important.
so I'm just curious, what do you think of these weight loss peptides that now they are looking to create it into a pill, apparently is coming soon, so that people don't need to inject and how, because it is suggested that the sales of these medications are going to even be bigger than statins, if you can imagine.
Oh, they are. They are. The sales will.
They're already
Actually,
bigger.
Artie Kaplan out of Yale, I think no, I think he's out of New York. He's an ethicist and he's done some great pieces on this. Effectively, the direct to consumer sales from Eli Lilly and other companies, other pharmaceuticals of the GLPs is
Mhm.
going to bring in trillions of dollars. But whatever the trillion is, I don't know the number, but multiply whatever that is by three. Let's say it's one, make it 4 million, 4 trillion are going to be the damage and they will not be accountable for that damage because they didn't have the licensing to be accountable. They didn't sit across from the patient. They just sold it to the patient. Whether you're the pharmaceutical or you're an influencer, the reality is that we know again that an unhealthy gut doesn't make a GLP the way it
Mm.
should. So by giving something to mask the symptom and knowing that it's a 2 year maybe it'll be a 3-year window subcutaneously until it then backfires. This is this is wrong. This is really wrong. And when we if we start to use the oral, it's going to be even worse because Bonnie, you understand oral medications. Number one, they're going to affect the microbiome. They're going to affect the sensing of healthy nutrients. We are going to deregulate in our own gut. We're going to deregulate how we sense healthy nutrients by taking these oral meds. It's going to change the entire biology of the gut from healthy biology to unhealthy biology. Secondarily, when it gets absorbed, anything that we give, just like in the Women's Health Initiative, when we gave estrogen orally, it had to go to the liver for first pass effect. That's
Mm.
going to change it. And then it gets conjugated and deconjugated. And then we don't know whether that person's going to make it into a toxin and recirculate it from the gut through the body, from the gut through the body, and never eliminate it. And we are looking at all kinds of problems. I am not opposed to using GLPs, microdose, whatever dose, in order to stop the raining and gaining of weight, not literally rain, but the gaining of weight. And so create the sun to shine and then do some other things, right? Stop the rain, the sun shines, and now we can fix the roof. That's JFK. But I think at the end of the day, use a GLP-1, but use it responsibly and know that you need to fix something while you're using it because that is a temporary fix.
Right. I think it doesn't take away what I always say is the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
I mean,
Perfect.
that's what it is. I mean, you still got to do the basic stuff. And unfortunately, and now we're going back to the beginning of our discussion, I feel like for the past decades, we've lived in a culture that has been looking for the pill to cure the ill and not having to take any personal responsibility and engage. And I think we can come together. Like I feel like these peptides are so exciting. I mean, we
Right.
still, if you want bones, healthy bones and body, you're going to want to, you don't have to row, but do something. Although that is like one of the best exercises there is. But the point is, it doesn't take away having to do it, but it'll make your efforts, I'm guessing, better.
Mhm.
So where do you think this is all going? Your prediction on the just, what's going to happen? I guess you've kind of discussed already the weight loss medications, but the other peptides and the exosomes, stem cells, all of that. Where do
So
you
there's
think this?
nowhere this can only go forward. So that's exciting. And doing it responsibly will be even more exciting. I think the key thing is that when it's not done responsibly and people get harmed. So I think, licensing and clinical training and outcome tracking and those pillars are really important. Those are three pillars. I think that's critical because we know that all over the social media, there are people that are using stem cells, including physicians who have harmed others. And so something is being done in an irresponsible way. I think we need to become responsible. We need to become accountable and we need to do the best that we can for the person in front of us. And we need to have conversation, but we need to use the best in class product. If we want excellence, then we need to use excellence. So I think we're going in the right direction. I think the government regulatory environment is shifting. I know that peptides that are for research only companies have been shut down. I know that the regulatory environments are now allowing, you know, a number of peptides, 14, and it will be more over time to be used and to be made in pharmacies, with rigorous standards. And I know that exosomes and mu cells as well have been approved in Florida, um, uh, Florida, Utah, Arizona, Tennessee, Montana, and different states are now understanding that we need to do this. So this is slowly rolling out, and it's someday it will pop and it will be natural. It'll be what we all do. We will
I
have a
I
longevity lens for helping to restore health span over lifespan.
I love this, and this conversation to me has just been fantastic and just really like exciting and positive.
You are fantastic because
Okay.
you're just
So
bringing this information out and
well, it's
help
so
my
important.
priority.
It is so important. And really for practitioners, I have to say, almost more than anyone, that they realize there's other tools out there. I mean, even for, I mean, there's people, obviously deal with traumatic brain injuries all the time, and still they're not giving them these other solutions.
Right. No, no, no. I work with wounded warriors. I've had hundreds of them in my practice, and they're giving shopping bags full of drugs to treat their brain injury when they come back and they're wounded. They might be, we just lost one and he was only 30 years old. And
Oh my
it breaks
goodness.
my heart. It really breaks my heart. He had several surgeries, but really I love these guys to pieces. They fought for us. Freedom isn't free. I fight for them in every way possible. And it might be my reason of being. I'm not sure, but, um, understanding and restoring their biology for these youth in my mind, they're all like my son, and for all of us has to be the future. It's here now. The science exists. It's ever emerging. There are training programs abundantly to help you understand this. If you reach out to me at Treat Wellness, Mail, Treat Wellness, TREAT, Wellness, WELLNESS, mail, MAIL at gmail.com. I can direct you to training programs if you need them to learn about peptides, to learn about stem cells, to learn about hormone replacement therapy or anything that you need. My goal is to educate generously, to share my knowledge, to share whatever my case is, to share everything I know so that we can make the whole better.
I love it. So I understand you have a big symposium coming up in the next month.
Oh, I'm doing a symposium actually for free. I mean, I've got people flying in from out of town to do some presentations. It'll be like 8 different speakers on all of the different biological therapies, including hormones and the systems age testing and hormones and stem cells and
And
peptides.
is this for the public or just
It's for the
practitioners?
public. This particular
Oh,
group right now
fantastic.
is for a trial, an attorney association here in Massachusetts. It's a pretty big group, but I just love to share that. I mean, it's really fun. I've done it before. I've done it multiple times before, and I teach clinicians, I teach the consumer. Everybody has to have knowledge so that we can communicate. The more you teach, the more I teach, whether it's consumers or clinicians or both, the more consumers and clinicians can communicate better.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. I don't know if there's anything important that you haven't said as of yet.
It's been really fun. You're amazing, and what fun to be with you and have some
Oh.
conviviality and enjoy talking about health and longevity. Thank you.
Well, thank you for what you do. It is greatly appreciated.
Yeah. I can't wait to see you back in Boston in person.
I will.
Have a beautiful day. Thank you for having me.